Hello, my wonderful, beautiful friends, guys. Welcome back to r/MaliciousCompliance, where people follow orders to spite someone. And in today's episode, it's all about bad Karen bosses, guys. So if you've ever dealt with or had a bad boss before, this one's for you. The stories are so satisfying. I hope you enjoy them. Subscribe if you're not subscribed. And as always, you can send or link your post to this email right here. Let's dive in. I currently work at a Mexican chain in Australia. A few months back, we had this really bad manager who was doing a placement at our store, while her store was undergoing repairs from flooding. She's the type of person who looks down on you because you're a worker and she's a manager. She's a total nightmare boss. When I first started, I did this opening shift with her. I hadn't done one before, and I kept asking questions, which she kept getting annoyed at, and she kept acting like I should know what I was doing. She basically ignored me. On top of that, she belittled me for not getting the meats out on time, and also for working too slow, and she even yelled at me because I didn't put the coriander in our salsa when we were out of coriander. She had been yelling at me and treating me really badly all day, to the point that I'd almost walked out and left her, but I kept my cool. Now, I'd like to add, it's well known in the store that I have hip dysplasia, which in turn really hurts my lower back. So I do have to sit down for a few minutes and rest it. Afterwards, I'm usually fine. It is on my file, and the store manager has always been fine with it, as long as it's not during a rush. That day, though, was an especially bad day. So after around 5 hours on my feet, my back was really starting to ache. So I asked her if I could sit down for a few minutes to rest, as the busy period had passed. And this is how it went. She basically said, "Why? Can't you keep working?" I tell her I have hip dysplasia, so I need to sit down for 5 minutes. The store manager has always been fine with it. And she responds, "That doesn't even make any sense. And no, you can't sit down. And why would a young person like you have back problems?" I tell her I'm in a lot of pain. All I need is 5 minutes. I'll come back out if it gets busy. She then tells me, "No, I don't pay you to sit down. Just go take your break instead, and don't come back until you're done complaining." So with that, I make myself some lunch and then sat down in the dining room. About 5 minutes later, the busiest rush of a lifetime comes through the door. We were still a new store and the hype was high. So I'm talking a line going out the door, and it kept growing. My manager's face turned white as she starts serving people who are ordering large amounts of food per person. She then gives me these looks of distress, asking for help with her eyes. And with that, cue my malicious compliance. I just sat back on my phone, looking as relaxed as humanly possible. I'm taking very big and dramatic mouthfuls of my food while watching YouTube very loudly. At one point, I even had customers ask if I could hop back behind the counter, but I simply said, "I'm sorry, my manager sent me on break and said to not come back until I'm done complaining about my back problems, and I'm still very sore." She did keep staring at me, but I kept eating my lunch. Customers at this point were starting to get angry at her for not moving fast enough to keep up with demand, but she knows she can't blame me because of what she said earlier, so she keeps apologizing. She was running around the back to get salads from the fridge, swapping meats around, getting new sauces, basically things that a second employee is meant to be there to help with, all while customers kept complaining. I just sat and watched, smirking, as she clearly regretted not letting me sit down for 5 minutes. Otherwise, I would have been there to help. When the rush finally ended 40 minutes later, I clocked back on and said, "Thanks for the extended break. My back feels so much better now," which incited many glares in my direction. I didn't have to serve even one of the probably 40 to 50 customers that came through the door. And the thing is, she treated me way better after that, so I call that a win. Luckily, her store was repaired and she went back there. And people do say that I was an a-hole for this, but I don't care. Next week will be my final shift at that store, and I'm very thankful that I'll never have to be under her management again. Guys, I absolutely love the level of pettiness in this one, and honestly, I think how OP dealt with this situation was perfect. Like, they're not the a-hole for doing that Karen manager was. Like, the woman thought she could belittle OP and then shrug off their pain with no consequences. But being a Karen, she clearly forgot the one fundamental law of life, guys. That is, if you F around long enough, you will find out. I will say though, I'm glad she changed her tune after that. Some people just need that little tap to remind them to be a better person. So when I was in high school, I had this part-time job working a local restaurant. One day, I come in and I was scheduled to wash dishes, which was no big deal. So I walk to the back and I come to find that the morning shift did not have a dishwasher. Therefore, there was a mountain of dishes. On top of that, we got slammed that night. As a minor, I was required to take a 30-minute break in order to work my full shift, a 4 to 10 p.m., I believe. As I clocked out for my break, I asked my manager if I could have someone cover my position to prevent an even worse situation than already at hand. She responds, "Won't be able to. You'll have to stay late and finish it." Now, an important thing to keep in mind is that this manager was notoriously lazy and unhelpful. She never lended a helping hand to get things done faster. She would rather stay 3 hours past closing, sitting in the office, waiting for us to finish our closing duties, instead of coming out and helping and getting everything done in a timely manner. She was also not very familiar with child labor laws in Ohio. Since I was a minor, not only did I have to take a 30-minute break, I also could not work past 11 p.m. on school nights. So after clocking back in for my break, I resumed washing the mountain of dishes that accumulated. I just took my time. I didn't rush to get everything cleaned, but I also wasn't going extremely slow on purpose. 10:59 rolls around, and I walk into the office and I tell her I'm leaving. She says to me, "Got everything done? If not, you're not leaving." I replied with, "Nope, it's a Wednesday night. I can't work past 11 o'clock. Labor laws. I left the water turned on for you. There's still a lot left." And guys, the look on her face was priceless. I then clocked out with the biggest smile on my face, knowing that she was going to have to leave the office and do something for once. I asked another manager the next day to see what time she clocked out at. It was 1:15 a.m. See, that's the thing, guys. A good manager would have known about labor laws and planned accordingly, right? And we all know that Karen doesn't deserve that cushy position she has. Like, how do people like this become managers, guys? And I will never forget, I had a really good manager once that did the dirty work with us grunts every time we were slammed. A super cool guy to work for. Everyone just respected him for stepping up and helping out, especially when he could have sat in the office with his feet up like Karen did. And I only say that because guess how many of OP's coworkers probably have respect for their Karen manager? I'd say not too many. So this is not my story. It involves my father-in-law. Here's the backstory. My father-in-law works for a heavy equipment manufacturer. They make machines for gold and gem mining, etc. The machines aren't really relevant to the story, only that they're big and scary enough that everyone's very strict about safety. Well, almost everyone. This company also has one IT guy. He does everything from web admin to the ID badges to the printer isn't working. So obviously, he needs an office with a computer. The only problem is most of his job is keeping the ancient assembly line machines on life support. So the guy's constantly on the factory floor fixing error code 86 on machine C137, etc. With that said, here's the problem. One day, one of the snobby entitled VPs leaves the plush office suites to enter the peasant's office, and the guy takes great offense to the IT guy, who's wearing jeans, boots, and a high visibility vest in their strictly suit and tie office, and the guy causes a huge scene. The IT guy's protest about his job duties falls on deaf ears, and since the IT department of one person doesn't have an official C-level officer, the VP decides to write a new dress code for the IT department. Suit and tie at all times, no exceptions. So cue the malicious compliance. The IT guy shows up the next day in a suit and tie. He tries to fix an error on the factory floor. He rightfully gets turned away at the door for lack of safety gear. So he spends a few days in his office just goofing off while the errors on the factory floor grow, and oh boy did they. And here's the fallout. Finally, at around 3 o'clock in the morning, big production line X goes down. And this is a huge contract for the company. The company might go under if this client goes elsewhere. As such, emergency procedures state that all C-level executives and even the owner must be notified immediately if this line stops at any time for any reason. So the upper echelon of the company, including VP, assembles in the boardroom to prepare for their firing spree. Around 5 a.m., the IT guy's ordered to the boardroom where they really lay into him before they fire him. Threats of blacklisting him in the industry, threats of lawsuits for damages, etc. And of course, the condescending question of, "What do you have to say for yourself?" With that question, he unfolds a few pieces of paper from his pocket, and he puts them on the table in front of the owner. He then says, "This is why I have to wear a suit and tie no matter what. This was my objection because I have to do my job properly. This is the safety officer refusing me entry for lack of safety gear. And this is the record that VP got my emails but never responded." Not a pin drop or cricket chirp could be heard, just the faint ruffling of pages as the owner read. Finally, he spoke and said, "Your so-called dress code is officially revoked. VP is no longer allowed to have any authority over you. Please put on the safety gear and fix machine blah blah blah. The rest of us will stay here all day until I'm convinced this problem will never happen again." The VP kept his job, but he was transferred to VP of a division that did not exist and a workforce of one, only him. Rumor has it he's related to the owner somehow, but at least his self-righteousness can't ruin the actual work being done. Yeah, I was hoping the fallout would have been much worse for the VP. That would have been the icing on the cake, guys. Like, the guy was probably family or something if he survived a muck-up that big. And holy moly, was that ever some good cover your ass done by the IT guy. The look on the VP's face had to have been priceless when the IT guy pulled out the proof of him being a complete idiot. Like, wearing a tie or any loose clothing around heavy machinery on a factory floor can be a death sentence. A few years back in 2018, I decided to switch employers. I worked from home as a chat support specialist and eventually a supervisor for a major tech company. I had decided to switch to a small-time customer support agency that was just starting a new chat team. They had better pay and benefits because they only had a small number of employees compared to the former. The description of the position I was to be hired for was another salary-based supervisory role for their brand new chat team for the client. I'd basically be doing the same things as my previous job, but also spearheading this small department while simultaneously training other coworkers with zero experience in chat support. This was going extremely well, and our client was ecstatic at the results of the new chat program. They personally sent me an email over my progress. After about 2 months of doing this, the person I directly reported to, the regional supervisor, was retiring, and that's when the new regional came in. He was friendly at first, but decided that he didn't want to waste time on chat and directed me to phone support, which was not in my job description, nor what I was hired for by any means. He cited the client was unhappy with the results, which was in stark contrast to what they told me directly. Even after forwarding him the email, he was still not doing anything about it, so I just complied. It took just 2 days for the client to reach out to me personally. After explaining the situation, they were livid. My new regional had lied to me about his contract with the client and essentially ignored our client's attempt to contact him about the issue. I had continued to work in the supervisory role for phones until the first quality review of my employees came up. For team leads and direct call center employees both, this is where I review their interactions and grade them based off their strengths and weaknesses. Our regional wanted me to even include the chat support team, who were neither hired or trained for phones. He refused to give them training. On every single employee who was hired for chat support, I filed all of them as unable to be completed, and in my notations, I included that this is not the position they were hired or trained for, and thus an analysis could not be accurately completed. I sent this to both the regional manager and the client as well, since at this point I had a direct contact email. I was responded to the same day by whoever it is within our client who oversees all of outsourcing. The only words I got back were, "We'll deal with this." The client held a meeting the following week with my employers. Now, I'm not sure what was said in the meeting, but word got back to everyone that the client had dropped us for breach of contract. Because this was a small office and our company's only client for several years, this was bad. After that, me and my team were offered a position with the company directly doing the things we were hired to do, but required us to move 4 hours north. So unfortunately, none of us decided to accept the offer. I collected unemployment until I found a new job. Now, the company is out of business and is currently being sued by some other employees for unpaid wages. What a fallout that was, hey? And honestly, I feel the whole situation could have been prevented. Like, if they were the only client for years, how was the CEO and owner not directly involved when the client couldn't get in touch with the new regional head? It seems like an easily salvageable situation to me, guys, but I don't know. With that said though, clear example of someone new coming in and going, I don't know how to do your job, but I'll tell you how to do it and not listen to anything you say. Again, guys, it always boggles me how people with no skills or business sense get put into these roles and are never held accountable for their impact on the company. This happened many years ago. Now, my story's nowhere near as witty as the others, but it still makes me chuckle. When I was around 19, I was working as a receptionist, front of house at a solicitor's office. It was quite small, but very successful. There were 4 partners. The main one was the lady it was named after, who was kind of fierce in a Judge Judy kind of way, so I'll call her Judy. A new solicitor, who we'll call Anna, joined the team. We had a conveyancing, a personal injury, a financial and criminal department solicitor, and she would be working family law. And her specialty and main focus would be helping domestic violence victims. At this time, all the abused clients were women. She was awesome at her job. I saw so many victims of abuse while they waited in reception. And because they were so stressed and worried, they would sometimes tell me their life stories while they waited. I did my best to comfort them, and sometimes they'd have to wait an hour or longer if something else was happening. Anna advocated hard for these women. Restraining orders, emergency hearings, police interviews, protection, arranging safe houses, custody of children. I really admired her, and I still do now. These women needed her. Now, the thing about Anna is she was extremely posh. She was well educated, and she spoke better than the characters on Downton Abbey, or even the Queen. But she was also very opinionated, and she swore a lot. But she reined it in, and she was mostly professional in front of clients. Most of my job was filing, typing voice statements, and logging calls from women with restraining orders who had been contacted by their ex-partner/abuser. So I'd get a lot of calls saying, "Hi Sabrina, he called me at 8:15 and 10 a.m. today." And also an email at 9 p.m. through his mother's account. Just things like that. It all had to be logged and reported for the court files. I got so many of these calls that I would recognize each by voice, and this is important later. After she had been there for maybe a month, she was featured in an article that put the office in a very good light. The article highlighted her important work in keeping these people safe, and we celebrated with her. But the thing is, it went to her head, and she became arrogant and snappy, with little put-downs here and there to the secretaries and other workers. She became pretty full of herself, getting snarky and barking out "coffee" to me as soon as she walked inside. I did let it go, as she was stressed and doing something important. As it was a long time ago, most documents had to be faxed. Her office was 2 doors away from reception. She would let me know if she was expecting something important, and I would drop everything to rush documents to her. Waiting for legal stuff, police reports, or restraining orders could quite literally be a life and death situation for the clients. Sure enough, a restraining order document came through for a female client who was sitting with Anna in her office. She was crying, she looked like she had no sleep, and her story was horrendous. I desperately felt sorry for her. The rule was, if something important came through, I had to rush and interrupt any client meeting. The papers came through, so I rushed to the office and handed them to Anna and left. Moments later, Anna was in reception, screeching at me because the timestamp it said was delivered a whole hour earlier. I was confused, as I'd given her the moment it came through, but she wouldn't stop yelling that I had put this woman's life in jeopardy over my laziness and stupidity, and that I should be fired. She made so much noise that Judy came out of her office to listen, the founder of the company. Her face gave absolutely nothing away, and afterwards, she quietly said, "Please make sure to give the documents quickly in future to avoid any more problems." Well, it happened again. An 8 or so page document comes through for the same client who was there with her. I rushed to her office and handed them to her and went to leave. Before I could, Anna starts yelling at me saying, "This was an hour ago. What the F, Sabrina? What the F did I tell you about doing your job properly?" This time, she started swearing, and I could not get a word in. And all of this was in front of the poor client, who looked wildly uncomfortable. Judy came through the door again. And again, her face gave away nothing. She just asked me to come with her. She then asked if there was a problem. I explained, and then she thanked me. Anna followed us out, and she starts yelling that I had no respect or kindness in my heart for these women, and that I was a lazy, utterly incompetent, and I was ridiculously not right in the head. She yelled at me so hard that I sat on a toilet and cried. Over the next few days, the same client came in. Things had escalated further and hit the newspapers. It was an awful case. So 4 partners, along with Anna, were meeting with her in the same office. I went back in to give a file to one of the partners, and Anna pipes up and says, "Was this from an hour ago too? There seems to be a pattern here." Again, this was done in front of the client and her 4 bosses. It didn't bother me this time though. I had one of those moments in bed the night before. The moment when your eyes snap open when you're trying to sleep and you have that bingo realization moment. So I calmly said the reason why the documents appeared to be an hour late was because the clocks have changed for daylight savings time. I should have realized that when the ink was still not dry as I handed them to you. Sure enough, the document on her desk yesterday was a little smudged. The fax machine was old and it didn't update the time. My little victory moment was spoiled because as I was leaving the office, I tripped over my own foot and I knocked my head on the doorframe, giving Anna a good laugh. The next day, a staff meeting was called about professionalism in the office. The client who witnessed Anna's meltdown had approached Judy. She was really upset to see Anna treat staff that way, and her swearing had frightened her. Judy was very clear that this was not acceptable. The woman had heard enough yelling and swearing for a lifetime. Anna begrudgingly apologized to me and I shrugged it off. Judy also apologized, privately, for not stepping in when she should have. No problem. My malicious compliance was next. Every single call I had to log from the woman, I wrote on an individual post-it note. So I would be in and out of her office sometimes 10 times an hour. Her desk was flooded with post-its that just said 10 a.m. call from husband to client X. She was annoyed, but this was what she asked for. I wasted a lot of post-its. The next bit got a little strange. A lady who was in a safe house with her daughter called and said she was reconciling with her husband, and she wants to drop the case completely and she did not want to be contacted again. This does happen because sometimes abused victims do go back when it gets too much. This was a particularly brutal case. She had been beaten really badly. I told Anna straight away, who said she would call her in a few days, as calling right then might jeopardize her safety if he was still there. I said, no, call the police. She then asked why, and I said it wasn't her on the phone. I recognize her voice every single time she calls. It wasn't her. We then called for a welfare check, and sure enough, her husband had taken her forcefully back home, and he had his older daughter call the office pretending to be her. He was arrested. When it all worked out well and the lady was again in a much better safe house, Anna gifted me a bottle of wine and a thank you card. And then she asked me to stop with the post-its and that the message was received. She also apologized again, properly this time. What a wild story that was, guys, and what an ending. I love that OP ended up getting along with Anna, and what a hero OP was for recognizing that the caller's voice wasn't the woman they were dealing with. Well frickin' done, OP. That spidey sense totally saved that woman. With that said though, I do find it kind of odd that someone who works so hard advocating for abuse victims is a little bit verbally abusive herself. But again, I'm glad she changed her tune and it all worked out in the end. And that, my friends, brings us to another end of r/malicious compliance. Guys, I hope you enjoyed today's stories. If you did, hit that thumbs up. And if you're not subscribed, consider subscribing so you don't miss these crazy stories. And if you missed the last episode on the channel, it's an r/I don't work here lady, where a psycho Karen strangles OP for refusing to obey her. It's such a wild story, so go check it out if you haven't. And myself and Stevie Boy will see you guys in the next one. We love you.